What is going on, everybody? Wally back with another lore video. In today's video, it's a synopsis, not exactly a lore video. A little informal like the last one I did. And we're going to be talking about the Reef Wars, Skolas' part in the Reef Wars, and everything that sort of happened. Not everything, but a good portion of the events that happened during the Reef Wars. So if you haven't seen the lore video yet, it got posted today on the Planet Destiny channel. I will have a link in the description. I recommend you watch that video. It's done in the standard formal fashion, and this will be done in the standard informal fashion. The idea with these, again, is so that I can kind of go back through, explain the methodology in how the video was made, and then go over information or events that I didn't really want to cover, or I couldn't cover, or what I wanted to cover more, and then, of course, get feedback from you guys on what you liked. So to start it off, ideally, the way I wanted to build it was just do Skolas in one video. So everything that happened in the Reef Wars, and then break it up to his imprisonment, and then his breakout from prison, or his release from the 9, however you want to interpret that, and then basically his move into being this just ultra bad guy that wants to rule all the houses, this delusion of grandeur, essentially, to his death or re-imprisonment in the prison of elders, right? So that's how I ideally wanted to do it, but I realized that as I was getting into it, it didn't make sense to split the Reef Wars off and do it in its own video, or to talk about the Reef Wars separate from Skolas, because they're very much together. They're like a brother and sister kind of mentality. When you talk about one, you kind of got to talk about the other in a way. And the reason for that is because a majority of the named events and the named fallen in there are direct vassals or direct rivals with Skolas. So I basically tried to give it the best attempt I could possible of laying out the chronological order of how the Reef Wars work. So you have Sirius as the first battle, and you have Cybele or Sibyl as the last battle in the war. And they're called wars because it is a long period of time. So there's a lot of information that's missing there. Ideally, they would just tell us, how long it lasts. The terminology years is used. So again, there's obviously a couple years, maybe even a decade of time where these wars would take place. And it's not constant fighting. There's a lot of infighting between the fallen houses. There's a lot of maneuvering done by the Reef's forces. And then, of course, somewhere in that timeline, you have the end of the Battle of Twilight Gap and the fallen unity, in a way, to retake the Traveler. And that's not explained at all. So the Battle of Twilight Gap is sort of left out. There's some information there, but it's not explained enough, in a way, in the new DLC for me to do an actual report on it. And I know that there's information out there to sort of connect the dots. But whenever I do videos, I want to make sure that I have the best information possible to deliver the best experience. I don't want to take liberties with the story. I already kind of do that anyway with some of the videos. You guys know this. Sometimes I'll just kind of just make an assumption that sounds right, it's backed up by facts, but it's not confirmed. And I don't like doing that, so I try to shy away from that as much as possible. So again, I kind of get vague in certain points of the report because the information I'm using is semi-vague. So to break it up chronologically, you have the Battle of Ceres, and then you move into a series of other battles that are sort of foggy on the timeline. Fortuna is definitely placed somewhere at the end. It's called Fortuna Plummet. And then, of course, you have the fall of Periax and the fall of Urxis, and you have sort of the fall of the rival Kells broken off into other battles. And this is all broken up into the Maraid, or someone on Reddit actually said they compared it to the Iliad and the Aeneid, which are, ancient Greek books. And it's not the Maraid, it's the, Maraid, because it's after Mara-Zav and her events in the war. And I don't know exactly if that's how you pronounce it. I went with Maraid, but it makes sense if you sort of look at it from that. It's, the trials and tribulations of Mara-Zav, the Queen of the Awoken, and so on and so forth. So it makes really cool sense. And that's something that I just didn't see at all going back through it. So had I known that prior, I would have mentioned that some passing. But sort of moving forward to it, Skolas' rise to power is mainly due to the fact that he played his vassals more appropriately than his other rival Kells. So Eryx is the Wolf Baroness. She's one of the female leaders, and she was ideally the front runner. It's basically said that she is the front runner to become the new Kell for the House of Wolves. Unfortunately, she would ultimately fall due to a couple mishaps. But the cool thing that she put together was she grabbed control over the Orbic servitors, which had permission over the Wolf servitors. So it goes to state that some of the houses in the past have had certain rights over the other houses, that there is a certain lineage or nobility there that we just haven't seen up until recently. Like there's ranks and there's military doctrine that's obvious between, the captains, the Vandals, and the Dregs, but there's no real difference between, the House of Kings, the House of Devils, the House of Winter, House of Exile, right? You can infer those differences, but they all seem sort of equal, right? So the House of Kings technically rules over the House of Devils. The House of Exile doesn't really have any leadership. The House of Winter is sort of on its own. And then the House of Wolves, again, sort of on its own. And of course, you can bring in House Rain and of course the House Scar and some of the other houses, House Judgment, that we don't really see at all. Again, it's one of those things that you kind of have to take an assumption with. And I really recommend reading through a majority of the script, because the script sort of explains why the Awoken have this sort of abrasiveness towards us. So the first time we met Prince Uldren, which is the Queen's brother, when that one story mission, he was kind of a dick. That is just inferred. His mannerisms, his language, his body language is all very dickish. And pardon the lack of a better terminology there, but that's ideally how they presented it. And it makes sense why, because you look at these Awoken, they're fighting for us in a way, or the city and the Traveler, and they don't know who we are. They don't have contact with us. They've never seen the city. They've probably seen the Traveler, but they've never seen the city. They don't know who Guardians are or anything like that. We're still very much a primitive thing, or a glint in their eyes in a way, and they're out there dying for us in a way. Now, it still works out in the Queen's favor, and you could argue this in multiple different ways, that it was of the best advantage for the Queen to engage House of Wolves, because she took so much power. She has direct control over the Reef, and they have a lot of cool toys that I wish they would explain more of. So she has this weapon called the Harbingers, and then she has another weapon called Charybdis. And the Harbingers are like this darkness-infused technology, and it's only mentioned in term. It's not mentioned in what they actually do. We know that they destroyed the asteroid Ceres and obliterated half of the original Kel Viriax's fleet. So the original House of Wolves fleet was just decimated. So about half of them were gone. It caused an event called the Scatter, and that was when basically the Reef Wars started, everything like that. Then she has a weapon called Charybdis, which was used in Fortuna. So she took the asteroid Tenet and just crashed it into Fortuna. Charybdis had the ability to pull asteroids out of their trajectory and sort of fling them into another direction. And that kind of stuff right there, that technology is scary, because there are some Earth killers in the asteroid belt right now that exist, right? So having two of those big-sized asteroids crashing into each other is going to do a lot of damage. And that's basically what they use. So I argued that while Varix was instrumental in his betrayal of Skolas and giving information to the Queen to end the war, when he betrayed Skolas, the war was sort of already over, because it happened after Fortuna. So this was after the Harbingers were used. This was after Charybdis was used. This was after Periax and Urxis and all the other claimant Kels were dead. And Skolas' fleet was sort of already weakened by the constant infighting and just abundance of battles with the Reef forces. So the war was pretty much over. So Varix, in a way, you can kind of look at him. He is an opportunist. I mean, this is, again, said a couple times in his own cards, that he is a survivalist, that he wants his people to survive. But his loyalty is, in a way, questioned, because you can sort of feel sympathy for Skolas here, because as he went to Sabile, he was immediately surrounded and annihilated, because the information was given to the Queen by Varix. And that right there sort of makes sense why Varix has this fear of Skolas coming back, and why Skolas is so pissed off, ready to just come back in and whoop ass. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out for him. But it sort of makes sense. He sees a rise to his power as the Kel of all of the wolves, and is ready to just dominate the entire Reef, and he gets betrayed internally. But again, it's argued that the war was pretty much already over at that point. The Awoken had the technological advantage and the war momentum at the time to really end the war. The Fallen don't have any super secret weapons. They have an abundance of troops. They have very powerful ships. They have much larger ships. But that's it. You know, that's really it. They don't have any super secret weapons, at least that we know of. So it's one of those questions, again, that you kind of got to look at Varix and Skolas a little bit differently sometimes when you're putting together your own lore or just analyzing the lore itself, because they are painted as bad guys. Skolas is painted as a bad guy, when in reality, if you flip the script or look at it from his side of the shoes, he's trying to unite his people against an enemy race that he doesn't know anything about, and he's trying to get to the Traveler because he believes that the Traveler is their moment of salvation. It is their right. Varix has a couple lines saying, you know, the Traveler is yours, but it's mine too, in a way. And they are agreeably probably the first Guardians. They saw the Traveler first. It's the reason they're in the system, right? So there's a lot of things there that sort of paint the picture of who the Fallen are, or the Elixni as what they're really called. And it's very, very interesting. But the Reef Wars themselves are incredibly complicated. Again, a majority of this is because you can't visualize the battles on your head. It's not like you go back to World War II and you can be like, oh, I know where Germany is, or I know where Russia is, I know where these battles took place, or I have an idea where these battles took place, and you can map it out in your mind. But when you talk about Pallas and Iris and Eos and all these other asteroids, you probably don't have an idea where these asteroids are in your head. So it's very difficult to visualize how everything's happening. So it's a little bit harder to understand. I'm more of a visual learner, or a visual explainer. I try to show things in a visual way because that's the best way that I understand information. So again, the Reef Wars are very, very complicated, but the part 1 sort of explains Skolas' rise and fall. Part 2 will explain his release, sort of the information about it. We'll probably get into, there's a couple different theories on why he's going after Vex technology. First one is, there's a question by Varix when he's talking to Uldren about he won't be able to unite the houses unless the Traveler says his name by name, right? So the idea is that he's going to go back in time or into a different timeline to get the Traveler to say his name. Maybe that's one of them. But the reason that's inferred from the information, at least from the story-wise, is that he's pulling the original House of Wolves back. So he's going to take him before the Reef Wars, take the entire House of Wolves, all the forces, pull him back to this current timeline. That's really interesting. That's what he's going to do with Vex forces. And he probably, if he had succeeded, right, it would have been bad for everybody. He would have, at that point, probably won, give or take, right? He would have been able to unite all the houses, and we don't even know who the King's Kell is. The Devils are sort of done. The House Winter is, again, sort of done. House Exile is not really a threat in a way. I mean, they are, all the fallen houses are a threat, but they don't follow anyone, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information there that, again, I hope to explain in the next part of the video. I want to somehow bring in the Ahamkara, because I feel like those horns on his back are Ahamkara horns. Oh, it's not mentioned at all. That's just a visual guess on my part. And again, if I'm going to say that in the video, I'm not going to say it as fact. I'm going to say something like, you know, some theorists suggest that that's what it is. And that's like the best way to say that this is the way it is without actually saying this is the way it is, or this is the way it possibly could be. There's a lot of guesswork being made in almost all these videos. So I recommend watching the video, going through the script, coming up with your own references and information, and then, you know, giving me criticism. What did you guys like? What did you not like? And let's go from there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed the lore video. That will do it for me, guys. I hope to see you soon. I'm out. Peace!